Welcome to the latest episode of the WTL What the Law podcast. I'm your host, Callum Stacey, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Guy Grant, who is the current Legal Counsel UK with Eurowind, a Danish headquartered renewable energy company with a global presence. When we first looked into doing this podcast, Guy was one of the people I really wanted to come on. I've had the pleasure of knowing him since we were at the university in Aberdeen. And I think Guy's journey from university to where he is now is an excellent example of the wide variety a career in law, even with a Scots law degree, can provide. Having done an in-house traineeship with Standard Life, managing to make the jump all the way over to New Zealand and joining one of the top three or big three law firms in New Zealand before making his return to Edinburgh, working in private practice, and ultimately, most recently joining the Eurowind Energy as one of their UK counsel. So, Guy, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Callum. It's great to join you today.
Cool. So, with these, the whole series of episodes that we've been recording, what we're really trying to do is shine a bit of a spotlight on the variety of lawyers' careers to date, and that's both from a perspective of how you've managed to get to where you are now, and the interplay between private practice roles, in-house roles, and in some cases completely non-legal roles, and also the variety in terms of locations. So our history is obviously from the northeast of Scotland, university education. And I think you're a great example, and we'll go on to this, of how you've managed to get pretty much as far away from the northeast of Scotland as you possibly could.
Say nothing bad about the northeast of Scotland, of course.
Absolutely not. But one of the things I do quite like to do is just get an understanding of where it started for people. So from memory, and this is going back a good few years, but I think you started in Alloa. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Alloa boy at heart. I was primary school in Alloa. An interesting experience. It's a town with a quite a diverse set of residents. We've got a fair amount of social deprivation, but a lot of ambition. I think as a little town, and people trying to do new and interesting things. It wasn't where I wanted to spend the rest of my life, and that's shown by moving up to the northeast of Scotland, going to Aberdeen, and meeting yourself, Callum. From high school level, I went to Dunblane, which was a very different experience to what would have been in Alloa. The reason that I went there was that my dad was actually a teacher at the school, and so we used to commute from Alloa to Dunblane every day, and I had a really excellent experience actually there. It's a fantastic school. It's got a very sort of high achieving demographic, and so there was always like a proactive, go for it in terms of education. Go and achieve what you can. Go and do something interesting. There was never a limit put on you. So I suppose that was my formative years from primary and secondary education.
And as the son of a teacher, when you're going through school, did you have pressure to be one of those high achieving people, or was your dad quite kind of, well, I'm Mr. Grant, Guy, something else?
Yeah, there was a bit of that, but no, I wouldn't say there was a huge pressure. There was an enthusiasm that you would do well, and there's enthusiasm that you'd work hard for things. I would say my academic achievements at high school would suggest that there wasn't a huge level of pressure. So fairly reasonable grades, but nothing stellar. I wasn't setting the heather alight with what I was doing at high school level. Started having plenty of fun and enjoying social times, maybe too much, I would say, towards the latter parts of high school. And of course, you'd have seen that reflected in my time at university as well. But no, there was never a sort of you must get 5 A's, or you must get, 3 advanced hires at A or anything like that. It was never like that. It was just a broad um, recognition where people did well, celebration of success. I kind of it was that really. It was a celebration of if you do well, that's great. People will be supported to achieve. But if you don't, I mean, there was no sort of
It's not the end of the world.
feeling beaten down for not having got an A.
Yeah. And from that, was it always, when you were in fourth, fifth, and sixth year, was the plan always to go and study law, or was it something that
No,
kind of you fell
no,
into?
very much fell into, very much. So when I first had applied to university, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I went down the UCAS list for all the courses and went, what's at the top? Accountancy. Where can I apply for that? Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, Edinburgh. Got rejected from a bunch of them. I got accepted, despite my fairly woeful maths grades. I was accepted into accountancy at Dundee, and then had the sudden screeching halt saying, "No, don't do that. I don't want to do that." And so then I took a gap year at that point, and I worked in a shop in Stirling, and I saved up some cash and went and did some travelling. So I fairly limited it. The travelling was actually to New Zealand, which was really the start of the
Okay.
love affair with that country. Um, and so I went. I'd met one of the guys that was a year below me at school, who like, finished school in fifth year and was working similarly in Stirling at the time, and we decided to travel together. And when we were there, he decided to go one way, I went another way, and we met up to come home together. And it was, that was my sort of year after high school. But at that point, I then said, well, what am I going to do? What on earth will predominantly keep the parents happy? And I had sufficient grades in the correct subjects to be able to study law. And I thought, well, no parent is going to say that's not a good idea. So there I was, applying to be a lawyer, without any real background or having had any work experience in it, or really honestly understanding what that meant.
And did,
And
just out of
the rest is
interest,
history.
if your sort of parents are in the teaching sphere, did you have access in your kind of either your own or your family network to lawyers, or was it just there's some mythical beasts that wear wigs and go to
Yeah,
court?
I would. There is some link to the legal world within our family. So my uncle is a procurator fiscal, or he was rather. But I wouldn't say that was a driving influence in me deciding to become a lawyer. To be honest, I kind of didn't really think about the fact that he was a lawyer. We never really talked about it. It was never a sort of, this is a career thing that you should aspire to. And honestly, I think he was seeing that service change at the time, and he was fairly forthright in his advice to not become a lawyer, or at least not in any sort of public sphere. And I think he was then saying that, oh, actually, private practice might be a valuable thing to do. But no, so essentially, there wasn't anybody that I knew that was in that sort of corporate side, that wigs, gowns, on the sort of criminal side, or the you know litigation side of things. So not a huge amount, no.
So fast forward a little bit, you get into Aberdeen Uni, you have David Lesso's first lecture that everybody that
Mm.
seems to study law in Aberdeen remembers,
Court
and
of
the fact
session.
that is it the court of session, and apparently it doesn't move.
It never moves. Yes.
It never moves. I mean, when you sort of your first year, was that um, what you were expecting? Was it something completely different? Did you enjoy it?
Do you know what? I don't think I really had a clear expectation of what university was going to be like, and it met any expectations that I did have, and exceeded them in every way I could think of, because it was just such an eye-opening experience, and suddenly you were thrust into this world of education and academia, and you were coming across people that I'd never met before, really. You know, lots of friends from when we were younger were going to university, but the type of people that I would socialise with were not the same that would go into a law class, a first year law class at Aberdeen. Um, so it was sort of a, yeah, it was very much an eye opening experience. Being like, right, wow, okay, there's people who know about law. They know what this is. They've clearly decided this is something they actually want to do actively. And then I was thinking, oh, I think I want to be here. I would say most of my experience would form around the sort of social side of university at that point. I couldn't say that I was particularly studious first year. I did enough to get by. But a lot of it was that
As we
experience of
all
being
do.
away from home and making new friends and getting new experiences and so that I think that's my abiding memory of first year, is that sort of growing up a
Yeah.
bit.
And how, if at all, did the fact that you did a gap year, um, did that help the transition? Did it make you like be enthusiastic
Yeah,
about going back into education again, or
I mean, I suspect, it's difficult with hindsight. I think the going back into education bit maybe wasn't really what I was focused on at that point. I think it was really the going away and having an interesting experience and meeting new friends. And so, I mean, that's something perhaps I should have had more focus on the academic side, but it was very interesting. It was, as well as sort of social eye opening, actually getting into the sort of the academic side of law. That was also a sort of revelation to me. And I was thinking, oh, actually, here's a depth of understanding that you can gain and you can work through and you can develop that I never really appreciated before. And it was, yeah, I suppose that was a really quite a formative piece of first year, was seeing, okay, there's significant depth and complexity that I just didn't have anything prior to that point that suddenly you're awakened to.
and you've mentioned it already, but the social side, and I think this is one of the key parts of universities. You're in your late teens, early 20s. It's quite a formative um, period of people's lives. And one of the things from doing these episodes that I found really quite interesting is typically um, your law graduate tends to be relatively high achieving. If you looked at the
Yeah.
spectrum of
Yep.
uh, school leavers, they are at a certain end of that spectrum. And one of the themes that's come out from doing these interviews with people is that at the time they often felt quite um, challenged because they'd maybe gone from being in a relatively small pool to now being in a bigger pool of that a bunch of people at that end of the spectrum, and trying to get the balance between the social side of university and the work side of university. Looking back, is there, if you were telling your kids in 18 years time or 17 years time when they're about to go to university, is there anything that looking back you think actually that really worked for me, or I really wouldn't do that again if I had the choice?
You know, in some ways, I would say go out and do the social things. Go and get that experience. Go and don't worry overly about the study side of things. That might sound like the wrong bit of advice to be giving, but I think it's really important. As you say, it's formative. It gives you a whole load of very valuable life experiences. That sort of socialization piece and going out and finding out who you are and like what you like in life. And I think that is equally as important as the sort of academic side of things. That is not to say that you shouldn't focus on academics. It's obviously it's clearly important. You need to pass everything you're going through. You need to have that solid foundation in the law. You need to be able to implement that the rest of your career. But as long as you get that foundational point, my experience has been that it's not critical to then having a successful career later on to have been high achieving it in the first year. It certainly would have helped if I'd, things might have been easier in the first couple of years of my practice, had I spent more time focusing and more time in the library. But I don't think it has been, a critical point. I don't think that certainly would have held me back, and it's something that I would encourage people not to be too concerned about the staying in the library till midnight. Go to a bar till midnight every now and again.
or every night.
Oh yeah, well, that's
To be
might not be
honest
good
with
for
you,
your
so
health, but yeah,
I shouldn't poke fun. I just have this memory, and I don't know if it was in third or fourth year, but I think you were working at Revolution at the time,
yeah,
and you coming in looking a little worse for wear. And I don't think it had been because you were out partying. I think it was because you were working till about the bar closes at 1, then you have to clean up and stuff like this. And it was one of
yeah,
those rare lectures at about 9 a.m. This isn't
yeah.
worth it.
That would sound about right. To be fair, after you'd closed down one of those late nights, then there inevitably would be a little bit of drinking involved after the bar had closed. I don't know if you can do that anymore, but certainly at the time that was the case. So there might have been an element of tiredness mixed in with a couple of beers as well. So yeah,
these,
that's a,
these
that's
things
a fair
happen.
comment. But that's another thing is actually, having work experiences while you're at university. I certainly have found that to be a really valuable thing. I've had a lot of jobs over my career, not in law. I've had quite a few in law, as we'll come on to, I'm sure. But I've worked in a wide range of places, and met a lot of people doing different things in their lives, and that has been really valuable. That sort of getting into the world of work, seeing that there are management structures, understanding that there are responsibilities that you have to have, some of them of which you won't meet if you're going to bars till till midnight, and people will be disappointed in you every now and again, and you have to face it. And it's like learning to take criticism, learning to control what you're doing, and understand where you should be and what you're meant to be doing. So valuable stuff.
I mean, I think fundamentally, law, irrespective of what part of the law you work in, ultimately is about people, and
Yes, absolutely.
having the ability to both speak to people and read people. However, you
It's
get that
invaluable.
experience makes a huge difference from
Yeah,
what I've seen at
absolutely.
least.
And I would say, actually, for anybody who's at university just now, you don't get much more of that sort of direct contact with people than working in a bar or a restaurant. So, people sometimes at their worst and often at their best, but not necessarily in complete control. And that, I think that's a really valuable experience, being able to handle people who are being difficult or people who are not quite acting as they would normally. I think that's something to be said for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, zapping on a little bit, you
Yeah,
get through Aberdeen, do your undergrad. Then, because we're in Scotland, we do the diploma. Remind
yeah.
me, did you do the diploma in Aberdeen, or did
I did
you?
indeed. Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
say no more.
Which, well, I was gonna say I definitely applied to Aberdeen. That was the last year, from memory, that the course was taught in its sort of light form. I think it has subsequently become a much more difficult qualification, and I saw that, and that was one of the only examples of me having some sort of proactivity and working out what was going on. Is this easy? Yes, that's easy, and that's the same cost. Fine, we'll
We're there.
yeah, yeah, that's it. I'll stay. I've,
Yeah,
I've got a flat already. Yeah,
yeah, 100%. And so you get through your diploma. This is where my LinkedIn stalking and memory fades slightly.
yeah,
I'm guessing that was 2009 to 2010,
correct.
I
Yes.
think. Did you then go straight into your traineeship, or did you have another
No, no, I didn't.
break?
I mean, towards the end of university, I was having that wobble that I think a lot of people might have: is, do I even want to be a lawyer? I don't really know. I would say one of the things that I didn't do enough of when I was at university is go out and get work experience. I'd spent my summers working in restaurants and in bars and in shops, and I hadn't focused. I hadn't seen the value. I hadn't appreciated how important and formative getting a summer placement, or which lead into a traineeship, that somehow passed me by. Um, so that period coming out the back of the diploma, I didn't have a traineeship to go into. I'd applied for a few, one of them being the fiscal service, actually, much against my uncle's advice. I didn't get into that one, and probably a good thing, to be honest. And then I'd been working various jobs, did a ski season, which was a bit of fun. I worked in Austria for a few months, again behind a bar. It takes you lots of places, and then came back and thought, right, I better knuckle down and get myself a training contract. I applied for the Standard Life training contract, went through the whole 7 different interview processes with that, and somehow came out with a job. And it didn't start for another 18 months. And so there I was, just sort of free to do what I wanted to do for that period until it started. But yeah, it wasn't directly into work. It was via a few different things.
And when you were applying, that ultimately was successful with Standard Life, was it a conscious decision of an in-house training route sounds quite interesting, or was it simply I want to get qualified? Here are the applications.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. I mean, the Standard Life, the timing of it for the applications, it linked in, I think, with a lot of the other graduate applications, and so the timing of it just made sense at the point where I was at that point in terms of working, and it came up. The application opened. I thought, well, I'll throw an application for that. I knew 2 of our friends from our class had traineeships there, and we're just about to start. So that process, it was really valuable to be able to speak to them about their experience of the application process and getting a bit of a hint and a tip from them about what's coming up and what to do. That was really valuable. And I'd also threw in a lot of applications elsewhere, private practice predominantly, and a couple of in-house roles, but I think Standard Life was the one I was really focusing on.
As somebody who has not done an in-house traineeship, how did you find that when you got there, and was it different from what your sort of colleagues and peers were sort of saying that they'd gone through in private practice?
Yeah, I think it was a bit weird, and I mean that in a good way. It's really different. In somewhere like that, it's a big PLC, and essentially it's like a firm within the company. There was, I think at the time, around 40 lawyers. That maybe is overselling a bit. It might be slightly less than that, but it was a decent sized firm number of lawyers that were involved in it, and there were distinct seats, distinct departments you could work within, and so you cycled around various of them. In some ways, having this sort of single client made the traineeship weird. You didn't have that stretching, pulling you in different directions to different clients, and um, a lot of a lot more initiatives going on within the company structure that you had to sort of engage with than you would otherwise get in private practice. I think laterally, I could then see how strange a traineeship it was, having gone into private practice and looked back and thought, what are the trainees I'm working with now doing, and what was I doing then? And they were quite different. So I think if you have that focus that you want to go and work in house and you're not interested in private practice, then going into a big company like the likes of Standard Life is an excellent option, and you will get a great breadth of experience of sort of corporate matters. If you want to go to private practice, it's probably not a traineeship for you.
You complete your traineeship and then you move into private practice.
Yeah,
You're still a very junior lawyer, effectively an NQ. Was
yeah,
there anything at the time that you went, I have no idea what's going on here? Or was it
yeah.
quite a stark change between what is, as you say, a massive PLC to what are tend to be quite peculiar partnership businesses?
Yeah, everything was different. So I went into private practice with McClure Naismith, who a lot of students now will say they don't know who that is, and for good reason, because they went under the year that I joined them. So I don't think I had too much to do with that. But what I'd entered into was essentially a dysfunctional partnership. And I don't think there's nothing disparaging about that. It's just a fact that the partnership
Factual,
didn't
yeah.
function. It went under. And at that point, there were lots of things on, sort of political wranglings going on, and I don't think anybody that was involved at the time would take any issue with me saying that. But I wasn't clearly aware of any of that when I started there. But it was coming into a firm where they just needed help to get through property work, because that was what was available at the time when I stopped at Standard Life, 2014. There wasn't a huge breadth of jobs. The job market was not booming, and part of the benefit of having the social bit at university was making connections. And actually, I got the interview via one of our mutual friends who we used to play football with, and he worked at the firm, and he got me an interview by saying, "Oh, I know somebody who's looking for a job," and they said, "Let's have a chat to him," and it worked out very well. So there's clearly benefits to all that kind of side of university. But it was very much, to be honest, it wasn't like going in as an NQ. It was actually like going in as a first year trainee again, because I was going in and doing conveyancing and leases, and that is not what you do in a house. There were people who do it, but yeah, very different.
So had you had any exposure to that kind of work before
No, not
picking it up?
no. I mean, I was aware of what a lease was. I knew that dispositions, and I knew that there was a land register. And so, beyond that, it was what I knew at university. Essentially, a couple of years out of date, and then straight into it. So it was really essentially like taking out a traineeship across a couple of months in property. So yeah, it was different.
Yeah, I can imagine. And was that something that, I mean, that seems slightly crazy choice, to be honest with you. It kind of
Yeah, yeah, but as I say, it
externally.
wasn't. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't. I don't think. Well, there's no thinking about it. It wasn't a particular choice at the time. It was what I needed to do. I needed a job. I needed to be working as a lawyer. I wasn't staying with Standard Life, and this job came up, and so I took it. Just jumped, went for it, and actually that served me quite well throughout my career. I should jump at things and be like, yeah, I'll take that one, and
Yeah.
it turned out fine in the end, with a few bumps on the way, but that was it. It was a sort of baptism of fire, and I had some excellent partners that I worked for who knew that position. So I think being upfront with people and saying, I don't know something, I don't understand this, talk me through it. As long as you don't have to ask that question too many times about the same point, you're
Yeah, good
fine.
people.
Um, yeah.
And then, so McClure Naismith has its issues.
Yes.
Then you went to Bruness Paul.
That's right. So we actually moved with the team that I was with at McClure Naismith, which is why we moved there. We went as a department and joined.
Okay.
So that was an interesting experience, jumping from one partnership into another partnership with the team I was previously with. They were sort of the refugees from McClure Naismith, and they were aware of it. Initially, they didn't have full office space at that point in the Edinburgh office, and so we were working out of two sort of offices at the end, two sort of glass walled things. We were sort of essentially in quarantine to see are these guys okay, and, and everything worked out fine. And they were very gracious, and they took a lot of time to help me train, and actually it was a really excellent experience. And I have a lot of fond memories from being at Burness Paul. A lot of really excellent lawyers who are willing to spend the time helping train, and to welcome me in, and I made some good friends there as well.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Because, I mean, I imagine when everything starts to go to pot at McClure Naismith, that must have been as an NQ, a very stressful time of, I've just joined these people, what's going to go
Yeah,
on?
what's going
So,
on here? Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we worked out relatively quickly that there was an option for the team to move, and I was very fairly quickly told, "You'll come with us." I'm not sure it was that I was invaluable. I just was maybe valuable enough at that point. So
fair enough.
so yeah, so we made that jump, and yeah, never looked back. Actually, it was a really good move.
So you're happy, you're in Burness Paul, things are going well. How does
Yeah.
New Zealand come about?
Well, I was very happy there, and would have happily stayed there for as long as they'd have me. But my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, is a doctor, and she had seen all of her classmates deciding to go off to Australia and New Zealand, and she said, "I want to do that too." Um, and so I said, "Okay, well, I better come with you." And that was it. So off we went. I managed to get a job through a recruiter, and happened to be in an excellent firm. And it all worked remarkably smoothly. They paid for both of our flights, which was nice of them. You know, they were very happy to have somebody with a bit of international experience. I think the job market there was a bit tight in terms of candidates, and so they were spreading their net a bit wider and said, "Yeah, sure, we'll take somebody from the UK."
And was that when you went over, were you doing, because in Scotland you were doing property work?
That's right. Yeah.
Um, which is presumably quite Scots law specific
It is
property
indeed.
work. So in New Zealand, I'm guessing they're English law based
Yeah, it's
ish.
based on English law. It's much more similar to English law than it is to Scots law. But fundamentally, uh, a property deal is the same pretty much wherever you do it. A sale and a purchase is, it's the same start and the same outcome. Same with the lease. A deal is a deal wherever you do it.
Okay.
And so it was a case of getting to grips with the nuances of that particular jurisdiction and sort of building up this sort of bank of knowledge of where are the pitfalls. I wasn't qualified in New Zealand law. I wasn't admitted as a solicitor there. I was just working as a legal advisor. So there were certain things I couldn't do. So I couldn't process a transaction through the land register there. There were certain things I couldn't sign, which you would expect. But otherwise, could pretty much do everything that a qualified solicitor there could do, as long as you didn't call yourself a solicitor on your email sign off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And was there any pressure from the firm to say, well, going forward, it would be good if you could become
Yeah,
requal?
yeah, there were that was certainly was mentioned right from the start, and there was a training budget available for it, and it was always on the horizon thing, um, but actually we ended up leaving before that became more of a pressing matter for for the
Yeah.
firm. Yeah,
And
yeah,
how long were you there for? Was it just a year
about
or
two and a
a wee
half
bit longer?
years, 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I managed to dodge
And
the
what
retraining for 2.5 years.
good effort. Well, I still love there's a I think he's now managing partner of a place that's still Scots qualified only and works in the oil and gas space,
Yeah,
which is predominantly English law.
yeah.
Never had to read it. But it's one of the things that I think
Well
is
done.
um, really the ability to move and cross jurisdictional. I think it's probably worth emphasising and pointing out because going into whether it's studying or the start of careers and stuff, I don't think that's really appreciated.
No, I
And
don't think it is. There actually, I've spoken to a lot of trainees or junior solicitors, newly qualified solicitors at the firms that I worked at since we came back, and have made that point to many of them. So look, don't be scared about putting an application in to go abroad. Um, we talked about a mutual friend that gone out to Dubai, things like that. You can do it. New Zealand is a slightly unusual example of it, and there aren't too many Scots lawyers going out there, but there are certainly a number of UK qualified English solicitors out there. There was a couple that were working there when I was there. There was one from Ireland. Um, it's there. It's open to you. So it's one of these things that I think more people should take advantage of, and it's a really interesting change. It's a relatively easy jurisdiction to work in and to live in terms of it's
Mhm.
in a lot of ways very familiar to home, but actually at the same time a whole world away. And so it gives you a real breadth of experience and a different way of doing things, a different way to look at business that's really valuable when you come back.
And just to sort of dive into that a little bit more, what, what would you say is the sort of key difference if you're doing a property or renewable energy deal in New Zealand compared to Scotland?
So I would say that their overall attitude to doing business is a lot more on a handshake. There's a bit less formality. That's not to say that they don't have well structured contracts that do what they're meant to do, but the way that people operate in business is, I found it less aggressive than in the UK. I thought people were more collaborative, more willing to trust. Uh, I would say that's something we could learn from actually on this side of the world. It's actually been interesting. My current role, that's a lot of the time how the Danes operate. There's an awful lot more trust put in. You say you'll do this. We'll proceed without a contract necessarily being in place, um, and we'll sort that out later because we know you'll stick to what you said, and there's no chance you're going to go back on it. So the way that the business is done is slightly different out there. I would say maybe it's changing to be a bit more like here now, and what would say don't take that as naivety. They know what they're doing. They're a savvy nation, but just a slightly different way of operating.
Yeah, it's kind of culturally, it's more not even collaborative, but just more.
Well, at
If
times,
if a spade's a spade, I'll call it a spade, and I don't need
yeah,
to hit
yeah,
you over the head with the spade to confirm it.
yeah, I would say so.
So you then come back to Scotland. You join Brodie's and Anderson Strathearn, and you go from being, I think, predominantly a commercial property lawyer, and you
Yeah,
start to go into the weird and wonderful world of renewable energy. Was
yeah.
that something that was a deliberate decision on your part, or was it just an extension of because a lot of renewable energy is quite property focused, that was a kind of
I would say,
subset rather than a whole new area?
yeah. I suppose for the first time in my career, I'd actually identified an area that I wanted to be involved in, and so I then thought, right, how do I get there? And the role I was with Brody's and doing was not that. That was a very much retail focused role, and there was not really the scope to move into renewables. It's something I'd kind of long been interested in. It's as well as being able to see that that's clearly a booming industry and it is the future, which undoubtedly it is. It also tapped into sort of that childish desire to see big machines doing things, big things moving. There's
Yeah.
that element to it that is inherently interesting, um, and as well as a sort of developing area of law. And so I targeted a move, and Anton Strathearn was a really great fit for that. Uh, if I'm honest, when I was going into that role, my plan had been loosely in the long term to try and get an in-house role in the future. It ended up being relatively soon, only a few years down the line. But if I'm being honest, I was sort of targeting maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the line, but it just came about a bit sooner. So, a proactive choice.
You mentioned it there, but what was the thinking behind wanting to go in house at that stage, given that it's a bit of a full circle, albeit I imagine
Yeah,
Eurowind's a very different beast to standard life,
it is.
but
It's
in
a very,
terms
very
of
different beast.
kind of private practice versus in house, it is coming back to the start point.
Yeah, it's a nice sort of cyclical looking story. It's not as well planned necessarily as it might appear. I sort of just kind of happened. The role came up. It was a bit out of the blue actually. I had actually worked with Eurowind. They were an existing client. I hadn't done a huge amount of work with them, but I knew who they were. They knew who I was, and the role came up, and it was just the right fit. It was a good moment to make the jump. Um, I've left Anderson Strathern on good terms. We still work with them. They're still the external lawyers for Eurowind, and they do an excellent job. And it's in a lot of ways it's really nice to be able to work with the team that I had left on deals that are currently going. So sort of continuity of work is good. Yeah.
And in terms of that work, now that you've moved in house, are you focused? I guess first and foremost, is it focused just on UK projects, or do
We
you
are
have a wider remit?
No, we're just focused on UK projects. We've got a pipeline of Scottish work that is reasonably well developed. We've got some operational site now, which is great. We are focusing on a new pipeline of work down south, so in England and Wales, and at some point there may be a branch out into Northern Ireland and into the Republic, but that's maybe a bit in the future. But day to day work is everything and anything that comes through the door. It's you'll have experienced that. It's, you name it, it comes across your desk, and it's really interesting. That's part of what I wanted to get from an in-house role was that breadth and being involved in things from sort of inception to the delivery of a project and the operation of it, and being involved in the decision making processes and helping to feed into every aspect, every facet of it, right from right have we found a bit of land that looks right, all the way down to have we got all the correct permits in place for these guys to come on and do servicing of the machines once they're up and running, and everything in between. and then decommissioning at some point in the future. We haven't got to that stage yet, but I'm sure the challenges will come.
Absolutely. And I think when I look at my own sort of career to date, one of the things that I'm always quite conscious of is, frankly, I'm not a specialist at all. Because,
Yeah.
did kind of in-house and all that jazz quite early on.
Mm-hmm.
And my perhaps slightly prejudiced view is that property work is always quite specialist because I never understand it. So, as somebody that had done a career in what is quite a specialist area, to then go it and have that generalist requirement from your client, was there anything that you did or are doing to prepare and help that, or is it very much just lean on your experience and whether that's legal or non-legal, like working in the bars, to get to a point
I would
where
say,
everybody's happy?
well, first off, a subscription to practical law has been,
Worth its weight in gold.
and then some, and then some. No, but seriously, actually, it's been. You're right to say that property is quite a specialist area, and it is a complete jurisdiction in its own right. It follows people up, and it will take their whole career. Um, what I'm doing now is I'm leaning heavily on the guys that I used to work with at Anderson Strathern. So we go back to them, and I know the guys in the corporate team. So if there's a corporate matter that I don't have experience on, I speak to them about it. And it's having that trust in your external advisors and knowing that they're there for you, and they'll give you solid advice in whatever topic it is, and you can just pick up the phone and just say, "I've got an issue. I don't know what to do with this," and actually a lot of the time problems are solved quite quickly, and you can, with a little bit of research and a little bit of external advice, you can get through it with a perfectly acceptable outcome.
I'm quite conscious of time because you've been
Yeah.
very generous with yours so far. So, looking just to kind of wrap things up, um, what would you say is next for you? Have you got an idea as to where you wanting to go? Uh, I don't know if that means that your boss doesn't listen to this and we can gently push them to the side, or
Well,
is there what's on the hit list?
well, hit list. Well, in the very immediate future, I've got a call in about an hour's time with our external counsel to go through some lease drafts. In the next immediate future, got a nice weekend with the family. Beyond that, in the distance, I am just looking forward to getting some of our developments signed up, getting them built, getting them operating, and then just seeing the UK branch of Eurowind sort of growing, and seeing success for the business, and for all the hard work that our team has put in. So honestly, I see this as a long term role. This is I would say, yeah, my boss might well listen to this, but in seriousness, that this is a clear intention of moving into this sphere. And so, to my mind, this is a sort of maybe not a job for life, but a job for a very long time. So it's yeah, lots of wind turbines on the horizon. That's what I'm looking for.
Lots of wind turbines. Well, to be fair, if the GB Energy uh, comes to fruition and the new government,
Yeah,
then you're in the right place by the sounds of it.
there's a lot of positive signs on that front. I actually, I don't want to be skeptical, but so I'm waiting to see some more detail on that front. But I'm very hopeful that we're going to see some sensible policy coming out that will help. And some of the signs to date, I think, have been good.
Actually, we will bring this to an end, but just quickly, as somebody that's more on the ground than perhaps a lot of people are, has there been a tangible difference yet in your industry, or are we still in the building momentum phase?
Of the new government coming in,
Yeah, in
or
terms of things like planning and the renewable energy space in particular,
yeah,
because it was one of the sort of election
yeah.
battlefields, as it
Well,
were.
the big thing is opening up of wind onshore in England, and all of a sudden that has released a huge amount of work on our side to be, because there was always a feeling that this might happen, and so everybody was preparing for it, and we'd done an awful lot of background work identifying sites and doing that, sort of the hard yards and the technical side, and that announcement that onshore wind was back on has allowed us to go out and just practically hit the ground running, and go and contact people and see if we can get new projects moving. So yeah, I would say that there's a huge change in that front, and it opens up a lot of opportunity.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I'm not going to take up more of your time then, because it sounds like you will have more than enough to
There's
keep
lots to be
going.
going on with. Yeah,
But no, really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and hopefully you and I will get to catch up soon next time up
yeah. Thank you very
in
much for the
Edinburgh.
invite. Yeah,
Brilliant.
speak
Thanks,
soon.
Guy.